What is up, fellow sickos? I am Dan Valley coming at you with another 2024-2025 NBA look ahead. We're on to the Brooklyn Nets. We have brought on Lucas Kaplan from Nets Daily and Swish Theory. Follow him at Lucas Kaplan _. That's at LUCASKAPLAN_ Fantastic content. Does a great job covering the Nets. A lot of thorough breakdowns. We get into all things Brooklyn this coming season as they enter this new phase of their start their rebuild, we should call it. Very quickly, if this is your first time checking us out, please remember to subscribe, throw us ratings and reviews on Apple and Spotify, hit the subscribe button on YouTube, comment on all our videos for returning listeners as well. Help the alcohol love us back. These look aheads are bare. Grant and I continue to do them though because we enjoy them. We know you enjoy them. A lot of work though, so please support the show. Continue to share them, tell people about us, the whole nine. We appreciate all the support, but let's get to talking some Brooklyn Nets with the one, the only, Mr. Lucas Kaplan. Lucas, welcome back. Thank you so much for joining me. For now, we can call it annual because it's your second time coming on for our Brooklyn Nets look ahead. Excited to get into this team, which has changed a bunch when you look at their direction. But first and foremost, how the heck are you doing, man?
I'm doing well. It's whiplash to go from covering the Nets, specifically after their second half last year, to covering the New York Liberty, which, as we speak, are coming off a win in which they led by 40 points in the third quarter. And they are, by any metric, one of the best professional basketball teams in a long while. So I'm oscillating here.
I have a special place for the Liberty because I was just a huge, when I was younger, Teresa Witherspoon fan. And so I could sit there and watch highlights of her all day. So, and look, you deserve to cover the Liberty right now because of the team that you're going to have to cover during the regular NBA season. That's all I'll say.
Yes. I sometimes I'm like, am I being too positive in my coverage of them? You know, am I too much of a cheerleader? And then I remind myself what I am normally covering in the winter months. And so I think I'm doing them justice.
Yeah, I think honestly, kudos to you and all the people that are going to cover the Nets on they might be fun. I don't mean to we could dismiss this team in terms of wins of losses, but the last time this organization was rebuilding, they tried a bunch of cool shit and I covered them extensively at the time and I kind of enjoyed it. So maybe you'll be in for that. I mean, we have to start there though, which is, what do you make of them just cannonballing full on into this rebuild? I think it's agreed that universally almost that this is the route they should have gone. Do you, one, I guess, agree with that? But two, were you surprised at all that they ended up traveling down this path?
Well, my first reaction is I was upset because they made those McHale and Houston trades during the fourth quarter of the Commissioner's Cup that the Liberty were playing in, which really kind of ruined my night. But no, I think there is truth to the noise that we heard that they really were exploring the market for ways to upgrade the team. I think if Donovan Mitchell to Brooklyn was a real possibility, they would have tried to make that happen. I just don't think Donovan ever really hit the trade market. And I think over the course of the last year and a half, it became clear that there were no short-term paths to a trade to bring in a star. And when that reality set in, I think that they accepted it and moved on to this path. But I think the reason it took long, and I think the reason people were upset, is they did believe in trying to upgrade the roster to bring in another star around McHale. So I don't think we should be surprised in retrospect. I think it was surprising at the time, but I do kind of take them at their word, at Sean Mark's word. When he said, yeah, we were looking for ways to upgrade the roster, it became clear we weren't going to be able to do that in a meaningful way. So at this point in time, I don't think we should be surprised, and I definitely think it was the right thing to do.
I agree it was the right thing to do, and I wasn't surprised that they did it. I actually do think I was surprised that even knowing they didn't get any actual players back from Mikal Bridges, I'm still kind of surprised at how much they got for Mikal Bridges. But with that said, I also kind of wonder how much of it was just we know it was tied to what they did with Houston, but I wonder just because Houston had been a team that was linked at the trade deadline to Mikal Bridges, I am going to be forever curious of, well, how quickly did that deal become about, that opportunity? Maybe they had discussed the parameters of it, but this Mikal Bridges trade, probably they might still be looking to upgrade the roster right now if they don't get their control their next two draft picks back.
Right. That's a great point because it makes you think, I guess there was a world in which they were content to keep writing this out. You know, it's not that Houston didn't know that the Nets were talking to the Knicks about McHale. It's that the Nets must have really been solid in, hey, if we don't do this pick swap, then we'll just keep McHale and keep going as is. So I think they just did a good job of being flexible is what all of this sounds like to me.
What do you think, though? So the Rockets are still going to control their 2027 first round pick.
Yes.
How do you think that impacts what they're doing here? Will there be a level of, I don't want to use the word urgency, but okay, we have to make like kind of a huge jump after 2 years? Or will they look at it as like, well, we have control over our next 2 draft picks. We'll have 2 high prospects. And if we have to kind of suffer through this gap year in terms of assets at the end of a season, we'll deal with it. I honestly don't know where I land, because like, it's still kind of a big deal that like you have the next 2. That's great. Mm-hmm. Like, okay, like you still owe your 2027 pick, and these things normally don't turn around that quickly.
Yeah, the Nets had to take back 2 of their assets from Houston, but they had to give up 4 of the Phoenix Suns assets. So it's not like that trade made them asset rich. It's really all from the Knicks. What I would say is that I can't even think about 27 at this point. I would say the first inflection point, honestly, is next offseason.
Okay.
Brian Lewis knows everything about the Nets, as you well know. Wrote an article a few weeks ago.
Super nice guy, too, for anyone who cares. He's very
incredible guy. Everyone should follow him, any basketball fan. But he wrote about the Nets aren't ruling out trying to use 2025 cap space, of which right now they're slated to have a lot of. Is that posturing? Is that real? Do they really not want to be that bad for that long? I don't know. But I think the first inflection point before 2027 is honestly, let's see what happens next year. If everything goes right, if they get the number 1 pick, if they get Cooper Flagg, if someone's interested in coming to Brooklyn, this is a very unlikely outcome that the rebuild only takes 1 season. But given some of the stuff I think we've heard about their willingness to use cap space next season, I would say the first inflection point is next offseason, and then we'll see about 26 and 27.
They also, aside from kind of burning the whole thing down, they hire Jordi Fernandez. Do you have any insight into, just based off what we know about him and the stuff that's been said, it feels like maybe a guiding principle for them to install from day one is we want to be ultra aggressive and physical on the defensive end. Is that what the identity you're expecting them to try to assume, or is there anything else that you've gleaned from his hire so far?
Yeah, I think more than that, I'm interested in seeing how kind of they implement an offense. I know we're going to get to Nic Claxton, but Jordi seems to be a big proponent of side-to-side ball movement, handoffs, side pick and roll into action around the perimeter, lots of short passes that lead into other actions. I'm interested to see how he is as an offensive coach, because the Sacramento offense that we've covered and written about and really enjoyed watching these past few years, he's purported to have been a big, big part of that. And it seemed like for a while, Jordi was next up to get a coaching gig. So it seems to me, before he's even coached a game, I'm excited about the hire. And I think we'll learn more about his offensive kind of philosophy than defense, at least early on.
Yeah. And they have when you're looking at the personnel on this roster with which they have to implement the actual system, it makes it more fascinating to see what they're going to do, because there's not just a high level of creation on this team. There's Cam Thomas, and then there's all right, are we getting into the Dennis Schroeder? Are we including Nic Claxton and Cam Johnson? So it's you start to trickle down from there, and I'm just very curious to see. And they don't have even Ben Simmons, if he's healthy and at his peak, is not a conventional floor general. And so there's just a lot of sort of oddities up and down this roster right now.
I think, you mentioned, covering the Nets in the Bear Kenny Atkinson years before they made the playoffs in 2019. Atkinson seemed to emerge as a really good offensive coach, because even though those teams were bad, you saw their shot profile and their expected points per possession on cleaning the glass and stuff like that. So even when those teams did not have a lot of offensive talent, they were able to generate these ideal shots, corner threes, rim attempts, stuff like that. So I think Nets fans already have a baseline for Jordi and expectations within the last 10 years.
So because I monopolize so much of what we talk about on this podcast, I want to throw it to you first. What is the single biggest storyline for this team that you're going to be monitoring into and kind of throughout this next year?
I'll give you one general one, which is just, can we maintain some good vibes and positivity over a 12-month stretch? Do we think
I
that's
love it.
possible? Or do we think whatever ancient burial ground / affordable housing neighborhood Barclays Center was built on top of has made that an impossibility for this franchise? So that's number one.
The first year of the rebuild's kind of like a honeymoon period normally, and
Yeah.
they don't have. I think what also would help is they don't. I'm thinking on the roster right now, like they don't have anyone that's going to become a malcontent because they're so bad. Like Cam Johnson and DFS aren't those types of dudes. Ben Simmons doesn't have the cachet anymore for you to care if that's like where he ends up. So I would think that like this might be. I feel like this is going to be the year of the vibes in Brooklyn. Like I feel like the vibes will be good, even though the wins will be sparse.
Yeah, and it's going to be like a challenge for guys like Cam Thomas and Nic Claxton to like be like, okay, like year 4, year 5, like you guys are like leaders now, like you're the vets. You've been here for a while. We need you to kind of implement this culture under a new coach. So I think it's going to be cool to see those guys try to buy into that role. I mean, Cam Johnson and Dorian, we'll talk about it, but they're not here for the long haul in all likelihood. And then I said that was kind of general. Specifically, the Cam Thomas contract extension talks are, well, I guess not extension, but what they're going to do with him as his contract expires is going to become a big story for this team. Like for a third-year player last year, we heard absolutely nothing about a potential extension. Like they didn't talk at the end of last year. They didn't talk in the summer. They still have a couple more months to get it done. But it seems like both sides like, no, they're going to wait until the end of next season to negotiate. So I would say specifically that is what is going to emerge as a storyline for this team, barring a miraculous play-in run.
He is like a super polarizing player among people who follow the NBA too. And so when you look at last season with how high usage he was, let's start here. What stood out in a good way or surprised you or just most impressed you about how he was able to grow his game or what he did?
Well, I think for one, the off the catch 3-point shooting, like you really saw him kind of embrace that a little bit more and make 43% of his catch and shoot threes. And at the same time, start to map the floor as like a ball handler. He wasn't doing anything crazy with the playmaking, the passing, but you can just see like in the NBA, you have this high pick and roll offense that so many teams run at least a little. And the reads are pretty diagrammed. It's like, okay, you can only help from so many places. And if the low man helps, this corner is going to be open. And if he's in between the roller and whatever, and the pass to the other wing, Cam kind of showed that when he's running high pick and roll against these different coverages, he knows where the weak points in the defense are, which, if nothing else, is at least the baseline, like the first level of playmaking and passing reads you need to get to if you're going to handle the ball as much as he did, post a near 30% usage rate. So those two things were really, positive for me. And also, like, it's hard to take that many shots a game in the NBA and create space on a lot of them and score semi-efficiently. Like the load, we kind of, would love to see him be more efficient and the trade-off with the volume, but the guy's still getting 20 looks at the rim a game, 20 looks at the basket a game. That's not something that every player in the NBA can do, even if they would like to try.
No, and I mean, I think his shot selection could still be better, but you mentioned there was the catch and shoot 3 uptick. I think it was like over 39% on those last year. Like the percentage was high. And if his overall percentage, like I'd like to see the pull-ups fall at a higher rate, but if he's going to be at 36% from 3 on 6 attempts per game, like for someone who's handling the ball so much, I think that's fine. And I do agree with you with the passing, where I think specifically in some of the later games I saw from him, defenses felt like they were overreacting to him more because he was a little bit less predictable in the lane. And like you said, it was nothing too complex, but like he was able to like keep the ball moving and find guys who were actually open as a result of those like defensive rotations or collapses. And I still think, I don't know where you land on like, what are you going to be monitoring most closely if he's going to continue to develop, but I think that's still part of his game that I would like to see him expand more. I just don't know for me if he's capable of it, or am I just more morbidly drawn to it because I know he's going to have the ball a ton again this year, given how the team is built.
I think that it's tough to like check in with him at the start of the season and check in with him at the end, because there were so many times last year the Nets got down by 12 or 15 in yet another depressing game. And you could see Cam just be like, all right, fuck this. Like, time to cook. Step back 18-footer here, one-legged 12-footer here. And it's a switch that you can see. And so part of his development is going to be maintaining, I'm still going to get good looks for myself and my teammates no matter what's going on. I agree with you. Like, he's not a Kevin Durant mid-range shooter. Nobody is. A lot of these mid-range shots need to be, I need to get to the rim. I need to take step back threes. And the thing about him is, like, you've watched him. That first step combined with like kind of just how naturally big he is and the chest and shoulders, when he gets to the rim, it looks impressive. And you want him to, I guess, build on that mindset. I think that is going to be the key for me. Like, get to the rim first, and use the mid-range as more of a counter, as a bailout option. If we start seeing more of that from Cam Thomas, then I'll be fully in. I was a Cam Thomas skeptic. You can ask any Nets fan on Twitter. For a while, they don't really love my Cam Thomas opinions, but I got my foot in the door. If he does that, I'll fully open it. I'll join everybody on Cam Thomas Island.
Yeah, I think I've progressed to the point, and my co-host and I, Grant, have had not super impassioned debates about this, but I think he still views Cam Thomas as that's going to be someone who is this microwave off the bench scorer long term. And I think what he showed last year, his ceiling is certainly higher than that to me. And just like, even if you're not high on him as a passer, and as a decision maker, if you're going to have as high of a usage rate as he did last year, and he finished at 30.5, I'm looking at it right now, but like, your turnover rate is still 8.5. Like, there's value in, okay, you're not taking the best shots, but you're also just not junking away all these possessions. And so, like, I really do believe there's something there. I honestly don't know what his ceiling is, but if we would have had the same conversation last year with what I would have said, I think you can say, if you don't know what his ceiling is, that's probably a compliment relative to what our thoughts were on him, a year and a half ago.
The one thing I would say about Cam Thomas, which goes against, I think, the feelings of a lot of Nets fans, is that I don't think this environment where he just has the ball in his hands a ton and has free range when he's on the court to kind of do whatever because the Nets are sapped for offensive creation. I don't really know if that's what I'd love for him as a player for his development. It feels like it almost kind of allows him to maybe lean into some habits he needs to eradicate from his game. Like, almost the freedom can be a little bit too much, and hopefully Jordi can implement some structure for him, some actions, like some habits that he wants Cam to nail down. I would love to see whatever that might be this year. Jordi's, as you might imagine,
maybe is it as simple as just like get everybody, or mostly everybody, the license to grab and go off of rebound, so that it forces Cam Thomas like off the ball a little bit more, because you're going to be in transition or semi-transition. Like, you have Trendon Watford on this team. Like, just give that guy the license to go.
The Philly game last year when Cam Thomas had 40, but he hit like 6 catch and shoot threes and then like a couple like catch, pump fake, go to the rim. It's like, whoa, this guy is like an off the ball threat. If he's shooting like this off the catch and shoot, and his first step is that quick, and like he can kind of cover a lot of ground. I mean, we see him cover a lot of ground when he steps back and creates all that space from his defender. It's like, this guy could be a legit off-the-ball option if some of that 0.5 decision-making is there a little bit. To your point, I think part of that, and I think we will see it, is like, yes, I expect them to play fast this season.
I guess it kind of dovetails with this discussion, but the last time the Nets were rebuilding, it was different because they didn't have control of their imminent first round picks. And so they tried a bunch of shit. And it feels like they're headed down that direction in general now. When you look at the roster, they take the Keon Johnson flyer, they pick up Ziaire Williams from Memphis. Of course, that's an asset play. I know that with the seconds they get for it. Do you expect something similar to the extent of, we're going to see a bunch of midseason turnover here? And I think it dovetails nicely with the Cam Thomas discussion, because the front office's MO at that time is, if they discovered someone, like, okay, they still weren't married to them, but it was different, but they were married to nothing and no one who really came to, not even Brooke Lopez at the time. Yeah. And it's like, so Dorian Finney-Smith, Dennis Schroeder, Cam Johnson get mentioned in trade rumors, but like, is this also a situation where they'd be willing to move off of Cam Thomas if the offer is right, because they don't necessarily want to bankroll his next cut? Like, what level of try shit or turnover would you expect mid-season from this organization, given the direction in which it's headed?
Number one, I'm disappointed you didn't even mention Killian Hayes, who training camp contract, not guaranteed to make the roster. But in terms of trying stuff, Killian Hayes might be the ultimate.
Look, Lucas, he got cut by the French national team. Like, I want to know what the Nets saw in him. I still have, like, defensively, sure, just with that exception. Do you remember that stretch in Detroit? It was like 2 seasons ago. He was like lights out for a month and a half from mid-range or whatever it was. So maybe he gets that. But yes, I did forget that Killian Hayes was currently a member of this team.
Silver medalist French national team.
He was on it? I thought he got
no.
He gets cut.
Don't slander the French. Well, it's not the hill to die on, I guess. Anyway, yes, I think there is a similar mindset going into this. I think it helps that you have the same man in charge in Sean Marks. He's willing to try stuff. He's willing to take flyers. He's mentioned that as something he's excited to do and will do in his press conferences he's given since the Mikal Bridges trade. And I think with Cam Thomas, there is a level of respect for him in the organization that may not be apparent when you hear, oh, why isn't he playing his first couple of years? Like, they must not like him. Sean Marks and the front office has said repeatedly, like, they like Cam Thomas. They like what he brings. I think they respect him the way they respect Nic Claxton for willing to be around for this rebuild, take on a larger role for the franchise. I would be shocked if they trade him this year. I would not be shocked if he is not signed to a long-term deal next offseason. So if you view that as turnover, then yes. The other guys, specifically Cam Johnson, Dorian Finney-Smith, I would be very surprised if they're on the roster after the trade deadline. I'd be pretty surprised if they're on the roster during real games, to be honest.
Ooh, wow.
I mean, we could get one of those early season trades. Like, I think this is a funny comparison, but the James Harden trade that happened like a week or two into the season, I think we could see maybe that for those guys.
That's a really interesting notion because they're like supporting players. Is there just going to be a team that came into the season with such high expectations and it's, like we're out of the gate, we're coming slow. Like we just need Dorian Finney-Smith, the idea of a 3-and-D guy, or Cam Johnson, a 3-point shooter off movement who has some ball skills to him. I guess I could see that. We're just last season was different because we had the James Harden trade. Siakam and Anunoby were traded like pretty far away from the deadline too. I'm not used to seeing that much action pre-deadline.
I think we will get some of that. All it takes is an injury here, an injury there. I mean, teams know that the Nets do want to get pick value for those guys. I think the Warriors are a team to watch, to be honest, just because they, the Lowry market in sweepstakes they're out of. They need a couple wings. I think these talks will heat up again. The rumors that we heard kind of before the NBA world went on hiatus and everybody went to their beach resorts in August, as they do. I think once we get back to the training camp, kind of get in the swing of things, we'll hear it. Overall, yes, I expect roster turnover. I don't expect the Nets to be married to guys. I think Nic Claxton's going to be here. I don't anticipate them trading him. I think he's the perfect type of player who you can develop and keep getting better, but won't accidentally win you too many games. That being said, it's not because there's a strict, no, we're not trading XYZ policy.
I don't know at this rate, and this is a good time to talk about Nic Claxton because I love Nic Claxton, but at this rate, if the Pelicans center rotation stays the way it is right now, they might end up throwing Brooklyn an offer once the restriction list that they're not able to turn down for Nic Claxton. There's Pelicans fans will know. I'll just say Pelicans fans probably know their team better than I do, but there's a tendency for them to just list off like Daniel Tice and Yves Misi and Carlo Makovic, excuse me. And it's like, right, you're telling me their names. That doesn't mean that the center rotation is fine. So, but yeah, I would argue that Nic Claxton is he probably the closest this organization comes to just a guy that we have. I won't call him a cornerstone, but someone we value for the future is just sort of in place. Or do you think that Cam Thomas has left him at all in that?
I would say Nic Claxton fits that bill. I would also say I know for a fact Clax has a lot of fans in that Pelicans organization, and that's been a half, idealized destination for him, half semi okay, we've actually thought about it. But I think Clax is here to stay. I think he is the closest thing they have to a reliable cornerstone piece. moving forward. He's really good. Like he's really good. And he is not the type to elevate a bad team into too many wins. It's like he in a drop defense and your base coverages is a pretty good defender to very good shot blocker. Then you add in the switching and you add all the kind of different things you can do with him on defense. It's the sort of thing that gets you like is the cherry on top, makes a good team great. And I think that's why maybe he hasn't shined the way he has since they traded Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving at the deadline 2 years ago. But like, you know, you look at the Mavericks game from last year they played in Brooklyn, Luka Doncic cooking them in the first half. They come out in the second half, they just put Nic Claxton on him straight up, and he's by far the best Luka defender on the team. Like, freaky.
I still, and look, you know, you say he's maybe not the type of player to shine on a team that's not great. Like, this was the second consecutive year he was mentioned in the same breath as like all defense guys, where it's you should consider Nick. That's a big deal. I think his claim to like the national conscience was still that possession against Damian Lillard in crunch time, where he's just shutting them down. I think it was from the left side of the floor at the time. And he did it like twice or something. And like the floor mapping that he had on that entire possession was absurd. And I feel like everyone kind of understood. Anyone who like Nets fans obviously knew how good he was, but like that was his, I don't know if I would even call him mainstream right now, but that was where everyone was like, oh, like Nic Claxton is like caps lock good. What type of role though? Because this team I feel like is built to get weird. Are they going to try out more with him on the offensive end? You kind of already looped, but like I want to see Nic Claxton like, I want them to get super weird. I don't even want to see Nic Claxton drives anymore. Like you have that man run pick and rolls and let's just see what happens. I just want to see it.
They ran a couple of inverted, like kind of like pitch back, like Dennis Smith Jr. would like give it to him like 35 feet out and set like a little fake brush screen and Claxton would drive. I think we're there. Like the, let's say the mainstream quote unquote thing about Nic Claxton is that like, oh, this guy has driving ability on offense. Played point guard for an awful Georgia team when he was there in college. So maybe, you know, he's not going to drag you to a league average offense as that guy.
Imagine though, they run him out as the primary playmaker. The Nets are like 16th in points per possession or something like that.
You'd have to max them. I mean, hey, if they're maxing Bam, no.
Wow.
No. I like Bam. Listen, my thing was always when I was like, you can pay Nic Claxton $22 million, $25 million a year, and it's fine. Last year, my argument was like, okay, how much worse is he really than Bam? That was always my argument. I'm not saying you don't max Bam, but I'm saying in a world where Bam Adebayo is a max player, go watch those matchups and tell me you should only be paying Nic Claxton half that.
I still think Bam's a lot more dynamic on the offensive end. And like we haven't had the chance to see, I think Bam might be the best, well, because we haven't seen Wemby in there yet, like the single best or most valuable playoff defender potentially. And so like Nic Claxton, so like we need to see Nic Claxton in an extensive run in that setting. But if moral of the story is Nic Claxton is really good, I'm on board with you.
Yes. No, that sounds like Bam slander, and it's not. The thing with Nick last year is he'd have these like runs where he would in OKC, like bullied Chet Holmgren. In Memphis, bullied Jaren Jackson Jr. I wouldn't say bullied Bam in Miami, but like probably outplayed him slightly. And then they came back to Brooklyn and like he got worked by Trey Jameson and like had a bunch of bad fouls. And it was just a matter of consistency last year. But the point is he's very good. And you will see him as more of like the dribble handoff hub guy. This is actually like the nerdiest thing about the Nets this year. This is the most interesting thing because when you have these DHO like hub bigs, it's like, okay, they can make the bounce pass and they can hit the backdoor cuts, but like Domantas Sabonis going one-on-one to get a clutch time bucket in the playoffs. Right? Mm-hmm. For an all NBA guy. Yeah. Jordi is now doing this with Nick. He's building from the reverse. It's like you have this guy that can that can fake a dribble handoff and get to the rim from the 3-point line in one dribble and dunk on somebody. And so now you're building out the other part of that, which is you actually need to be able to make quick decisions. I'm not saying it's going to work. I'm not saying like Nick's going to be a great playmaker passer overnight, but it's definitely an intriguing thing to watch, like no matter how bad the Nets are this year.
You had a terrific video essay on Noah Clowney, who has like an increased role towards the end of last season. I see it defensively. Like even when he's making mistakes, like you could just see it with him. But what are you sort of? Well, I guess one, I'm assuming his role will be pretty big this year, and two, like what areas of development are you going to be monitoring most closely for him?
I want to see if his bot, like I just want to see him finish more 2-pointers at the rim. Like was not a good finisher in the lane in the G League and the NBA last year. And at Summer League, even this year, where he looks a little bigger, it's like you saw more of the, okay, hang in the air through contact, finish. That's going to be really important for him as an offensive guy, because no matter what your role is on defense, you can't be 6'10", 6'11", and shooting like 50, like 40 something, 50, low 50s on twos. Like that just can't happen. And then secondly, like, is he going to actually shoot around league average from 3 on decent attempts? Like, is he going to be a legit big wing type of guy? Like the guy he kind of reminds me of ideally on offense is actually Santi Aldama. Just like
I don't know if you know this. I will cape until the end of time for Santi Aldama.
I know you do.
The right audience.
I was happy to say that comparison. I think Santi's like a little more flexible on offense and his drives and stuff, and probably a better shooter at this point. But when I watch Noah at like 6'10" with these long arms, spot up in the corner, and can kind of slither to the rim on some of these drives, it's like I see it. Like I'm not sure he's a big. I think he's like a big wing that can play some of the 5, but like his defense really shines when he's on the perimeter, like blocking guys in isolation, like a version of Nic Claxton in a sense. It's an easy comparison.
So when you mention him like getting to the basket more, doing a better job finishing on twos, a lot of that feels like it'll be predicated on them getting him the ball in the right spots rather than him doing what we know Nic Claxton can do if like he's going to go into drives. Is that kind of then not the theory, but the importance of Dennis Schroeder on this team is like someone who's more established and can then at least maybe get him the ball in the spots that would translate to those higher efficiency twos? Because after him, it's like you can't count on Ben Simmons, and he's not necessarily a half court type of the ideal half court playmaker anyway. Is that one, like why Dennis Schroeder might be sneaky important to this team? And then two, is that like a level of concern that could stymie Clowney's offensive development?
Yeah, I think Schroeder, to answer the first part of that, Schroeder's definitely an important part of this team. I think he's a less likely candidate to get traded earlier, like as early as the Cam Johnson, Dorian Finney-Smith guys. He's also a guy that's spoken about the importance of being with his family, playing on all these different teams in different years, looking for stability, said he's liked Brooklyn so far. I think they're okay with the idea of like having Dennis around for at least this year, the end of his contract, and then seeing what's up. But Dennis he's by far the best, I think, pick and roll decision maker, passer, driver on this team. And he will get guys in their roles. Like he will get Jalen Wilson catch and shoot, close out attack opportunities. He will get Noah Clowney the opportunity to like finish through someone in the lane, which he needs to do. So I think you're completely right on Dennis Schroeder's role on this team.
Do you think, I saw it at least a couple of times that Clowney and Claxton were playing together. Do you think that becomes more of a staple setup this year?
I think Day'Ron Sharpe makes that equation a little more interesting because you have to play Day'Ron Sharpe this year. Not only was he pretty good last year, but like he's going into a contract year. He's worked his ass off. Like you need
strong
to get
too.
Yeah, strong. We could see Clowney and Sharpe as well. But I think with Sharpe there, I think you're going to see Clowney as the 4, and I think you will see Clowney and Claxton minutes. It is an absurd amount of length and ground coverage on the perimeter, and in a sense, almost reminds you of me of like the New York Liberty, who have Jonquel Jones and Breanna Stewart, 2 ridiculous shot blockers. And so you can play an aggressive coverage on the perimeter, right? And you have the other one back at the rim. And I mean, we saw there was a game, I think against the Raptors late in the season where they combined for 11 blocks. I think Clowney had 7, Nic had 4. And that's the appeal. And no matter what role Clowney's playing on offense, whether another big is next to him on the floor or not, he's still going to have to work on the same stuff. You know what I mean? So I don't think the offensive side is like an impediment to doing that.
Had me. If I didn't even hear anything after you said it, you had me at Jonquel Jones on that. But also if they're gonna use Clowney like that, it does feel like the 3-point volume efficiency is gonna be pretty important then for him. If they're just gonna kind of treat him as that de facto 4 a lot of the time.
Yeah, I think we'll see both. It's like in Long Island, he was the full-time 5, but they would also play 5 out where he was in the corner. And yes, I was watching Long Island Nets basketball last year.
You are a sicko. Anyone who has read your coverage or listened to your coverage, you are a sicko, and I mean that as a compliment.
Thank you very much. That's all I strive to be. And if I shouldn't have mentioned Jonquel Jones because I could talk about her for like 2.5 hours. Might be the coolest basketball player alive. Anyway, Noah Clowney. Yes, the 3-point shot making is obviously important for his long-term, growth. Even going back to Alabama, though, we don't have like a huge sample size of him as a shooter. All we know is that he seems pretty confident in taking them, no matter what level he's played at. So I think more it's just like the decision making, getting him comfortable. Are you taking the shot when it's open? Are you still attacking these closeouts? Because that's what's really intriguing, like the way he can move, like just as a thought exercise, if Nic Claxton never got that torn labrum surgery and was still able to like get up fairly decent looking 3-pointers, and you had Nic Claxton in the corner with his athleticism, you'd want to see him like shot fake and get to the rim. And that's kind of like where I'm at with Noah Clowney.
I've become more intrigued by Jalen Wilson based off what we saw from him towards the end of last season. I do like sometimes if he's trying to do things on the ball, it's happening in slow motion. And if you don't have a ton of space, I don't know how valuable that is. But the rest of his game just feels like super plug and play. What is it's another twofold. They're basic, but like what is the area of development that you're just going to be most focused on that we should all watch for with him? And then how big of a role does he get? Where is it going to be someone who is playing a good amount right away? Or is this like, well, let's revisit it. His minutes will be kind of all over the place. Then maybe later in the season, they ratchet them up.
I think Jordi will go through the same thing that Jacques Vaughn and Kevin Ollie did last year, where of all the young guys, and Jalen Wilson is not that young, but of all the inexperienced guys, let me play Wilson because I at least know he's going to be in the right spots all the time. And he's going to like fly in for an offensive rebound and a putback, or he's going to come up with like a hustle play that, you don't expect him to. I think that's like the floor for him getting on the floor. Like that's what's going to get him there. And then the pathway to being like a good, real NBA role player is what you mentioned in our outline. Clearly, ball, the Nets, this awful team. Can he hang with the big power wings on defense? He's not like a great vertical or lateral athlete. He's very strong, but he's not like, covering ground like a Dorian Finney-Smith. Mm-hmm. Is he still returning value guarding guys that are his size, but probably have an athletic advantage on him? That's what I really want to see from him this year. Like we talk about 3-and-D role player, whatever. Yeah, that's probably his future, but like, is he just playing defense just to play defense, or is he like an actually good defender? That's what I want to find out this year.
What is your concern level on Dariq Whitehead at the moment?
High, unfortunately. I'm gonna take it. Like first of all, he's like the nicest guy in the NBA, which I want to root for him so bad, and I do. And I believe him when he says, this is the healthiest I felt since like I was in high school and I'm just getting there, it's going to take a while. He tweeted after Summer League, like, I haven't even worked on lateral explosiveness and like that type of bursty athleticism yet. And I'm like, nice, like he'll get it back, whatever. But like,
it's also kind of concerning that he still hasn't worked. Like, hasn't it been like,
I don't know.
When was his last procedure? I don't know that off cuff.
Early February, they had shin splints. I'm like, I don't know what that means. Maybe you ask his trainer and his trainer disagree. Who knows? But for his sake, I hope it's true, because it's not like he's like an infallible prospect outside of that. It's not like he's respectfully Michael Jordan with bad lower legs. He still has a lot of stuff to work on. Like the handle's not very tight. The decision making like needs to get better. Even if his legs were, even if he was like a Michael Jordan.
Yeah, the stuff I saw from him in summer league where it was, I mentioned slow motion before with Jalen Wilson on the ball. I was like, am I watching Kyle Anderson right now? Like he's in the open floor, and I felt bad. I don't mean to make a joke about it,
No,
but he was considered as just like this sort of, not even boomer bust. Like they took a swing on
yeah,
him, and it's like to not even like see that play out. Like I guess if he's healthy enough, would you expect him to give him a shot this year? Or does it look like just based off what we've seen and where he's even saying his body might be at, they're going to have to continue the slow and steady and slow and super gradual approach?
I'm not a doctor. I don't know like all that stuff. I don't know. I can't predict, but like right now, it's not good. The athleticism level. And this was a guy that was like part of his cell. Like he wasn't the craziest vertical athlete. It was more of like stop and start space creation. But like he was dunking on people in high school, like taking off from the dotted line. I can't even fathom him attempting that right now. So I think we'll see a lot of him in Long Island where he'll have free reign. He'll be the focus of the rotation. And then depending on how things go there, we could see him in Brooklyn, I think, in the second half of the year. But for him right now, it's all about just how does he look? How is he moving? It was pretty unfortunate during summer league that it also coincided with like a ridiculously cold stretch shooting the ball. So he just looked like not even like a summer league quality player. But I think my concern level is I just don't know if concern is the right word because I don't know what it's supposed to look like.
Good point.
I just don't. I'm not considering Dariq Whitehead as, this is going to sound harsh, as an NBA player until he looks different athletically.
Yeah, and look, if anyone just wants to hold out hope for what he could have been, I went on a Duke podcast called this was like when they Nets first drafted them, the Devil's Den podcast. Those are good peeps. People should go check them out. And they had me go check out like some Dariq Whitehead, like vintage Dariq Whitehead stuff, and like that guy looked like he was gonna be. I hesitate to use the word dominant, but he looks special.
I mean, he was the best player in high school in the whole country. It's like I don't think that's a hot take from you. Like I hear what you're saying.
Another player on this
Yeah.
team who I am kind of fascinated by is Trendon Watford. What type of role is he going to have? And then what should we be watching for? Like, can he foul less? Like, what's up with the 3-point volume for him? How much is he handling the ball or getting up the floor with it? Like, what should we, if we're just casual Nets observers, like what should we be watching, assuming Trendon Watford is going to play a bunch? And if he's not going to play a bunch, I will be starting a petition immediately after we wrap up here.
Threes and turnovers. Because I asked Jacques Vaughn last year, I'm like, this guy can clearly play, like this talent in this body frame of his, but they kind of view him as like this primary ball handler type of guy. And it's hard to have one of those that turns it over a lot and doesn't really take threes. And I tweeted that last year, and then he quote tweeted me with a bunch of laughing emojis, which, I thought I was being pretty reasonable, but I guess it's gotta happen to you sooner or later. So I hope that doesn't happen again. I hope he doesn't quote tweet something I say. And I also
say something nice. Maybe he'll give you thumbs up emoji next time. Who knows?
Maybe I will. Christian Watford, his older brother, likes every single tweet I make about Trendon Watford. So I'm 1 for 2.
I almost respect that he quote tweeted you, even if what you said seemed perfectly fair, because I get inundated with criticism. And I'm like, sometimes I'll stop and think like, how do these NBA players or people with actual influence handle what is probably a different level of like you were being fair and what you said was pretty innocuous, but like it has to be exhausting. Yeah. I get exhausted by it on a much smaller scale. It has to be exhausting. And I'm sure, Trendon Watford's not getting it on like the Luka Doncic scale. Like It has to be exhausting. Like if you were to search your name or something, like to have all this shit come up. And I almost respect the hustle of it's Kevin Durant-esque. And I'm going to respond in some way.
Yeah, no, I did respect it. And I saw him at Summer League and like, obviously didn't mention it, but like, it was all good. And it sounds like the coaching staff's telling him the same thing. So, I think I've been vindicated there. The other thing, yes, three, in terms of importance, I would say turnovers, like got to limit those if you're going to be this big ball handler type of guy. Fouls to keep him on the court. The threes, it's like he's shooting 40% over the last 2 years on like 1.2 It's like 1.5, 2 attempts per 36 minutes. I'm like, dude, get them up. If you weren't making them, it'd be a little different, but like, get them up. And then also the passing ability is very flashy, or it's in flashes right now. It's like, oh, that's a highlight look. Oh, like, wow, dime. But on a consistent basis, like you don't see him create a ton of high value reads for other people. Like he really leans on that 8 to 10 foot push shot floater when he gets in the lane. Mm-hmm. And I'd really like to see him get 2 feet in the lane, and instead of taking those shots, kick it out for 3 or like hit a dump down pass. So I think I see what all the Trendon Watford believers see. This dude is big, fluid, and talented for real. Like there's something here, but we do need him to execute in a few more key areas to really be deserving of like, hey, this guy's good now.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any theory of what like he's best suited to do on defense? Is it just like find the guy with the most size who's going to spend time off the ball, do most of his work off the ball, and like that's what he should be guarding? Because I don't have like a great feel for what Trendon Watford is or could be defensively.
Neither do I. I think you want him you want him in a position to get defensive rebounds and go. Mm-hmm. Like, so you want him, I guess, on in the corners guarding guys that are going to hang around the rim a little more. He doesn't have the greatest foot speed, but he has like active hands. I don't know. It's tough. You probably just want him guarding someone like sized and seeing if he can use his strength to get stops without, fouling as he does. That's probably, if I were to guess, like a skill he's going to be working on this season.
You kind of already alluded to this a little bit, but so if they're going to play Clowney a bunch in tandem with other bigs, it feels like Day'Ron Sharpe will have an actual role. So like, what should we be watching for with him this season in terms of what they need him to do most?
So last year was about like, whoa, this guy's an NBA athlete now. Like he's vertical. He gets off the ground quick. He's finishing way more of his 2-pointers because of that. And he's like getting real blocked shots on defense. I think now it's just continuing to be like solid in drop coverage, good positioning, not committing silly fouls. I would like to see a little bit more testing him on the perimeter. Like he has these flashes where he's covering a lot of ground. And he might be a guy that benefits from this Jordi Fernandez system. Because if you remember as a prospect out of UNC, a thing with him was like, whoa, like he makes a lot of nice passes. He reads the floor really quick. And in the first couple of years in the league, it was like he had this cool random assortment of skills, but they didn't really like stack. So it was like, okay, it's cool that he can like make a short roll read, but he also can't score at the rim efficiently, so it doesn't really matter. And like, oh, it's cool that he's like a beast offensive rebounder, but again, like the scoring. And it's nice that he gets like these random deflections and quick thinking on defense, but his like technique and drop coverage is bad. So as he's worked to fix all of his weaknesses, you have maybe now like a really strong player with fun skills. So I would say the defense is the baseline. Like, can he keep working on what he's shown? And on offense, you might get a sneaky, like this guy can really pass sort of situation here in year 4.
And like sort of in what way? Like, are we talking like short roll stuff with him?
Just a quick processor. Like okay. The Nets didn't have a lot of guys that brought 2 to the ball, so we didn't see him in the short roll a ton last year. But like he'd get an offensive rebound and like throw like a Larry Bird-esque like tip pass to a guy underneath. If you're listening, if you can't see me, I used heavy air quotes on the Larry Bird.
I was going to say, so we got Nic Claxton's better than Bam. Day'Ron Sharpe is basically Larry Bird. That's aggregators. Throw it in there. Tag Nets down.
Exactly. Then you can tag me. But like he took like the ball out on baseline out of bounds last year and like threw a dime. Like you see it in like kind of weird spots. So I'm wondering if we see that like streamlined into a role. Like I saw that tweet the other day from somebody like looking for the next bigs who can actually pass the ball. I think Day'Ron could be one of those guys, like for real.
That's something I probably wouldn't have been thinking of watching. And now I'm like, so like, do you think the personnel to like kind of use him in that way where the floor is going to be open enough to get that stuff for him?
That's the thing. It's like, we didn't really see him in the short roll last year because you rarely saw anybody ever bring 2 to the ball, like against Cam Thomas until really late in the season, or Like, you're not really trapping Dennis Schroeder a ton. So that's, yeah. Or Mikal Bridges last year. Or ever.
Two players I'm not allowed to offer opinions on anymore because I was just woefully, egregiously high on them. Keon Johnson and Ziaire Williams. Who intrigues you more for this team? Who do you think will make a bigger impact? Do you think the Nets are more intrigued by it? Anywhere you want to take that. I'm not allowed to offer any pushback on it, so do whatever you want.
Well, you're going to hate this sentence then. You're going to be like, it's going to feel like you have tape over your mouth. The thing about Keon this summer is that he was good at all the stuff he was bad at. So, like, when he got into the lane, he slowed down. He, like, saw the court. He made nice passes. He wasn't going 100% all the time, which, as a Keon Johnson believer, it's like, yeah, this guy's super athletic, but, like, he needs to slow down and make the correct decisions. So to watch him be good at that in Summer League, I'm not surprised that they offered him a real contract. You want to say anything here? No?
Nope. My egregious take was, if you're interested, I thought the Knicks were the pick they gave up that became Keon Johnson. I thought they were going to come to like massively regret at the time, was my take.
Well, if that comes true, then we really have a story here.
Yeah. And and Keith Parrish of the Grit and Grind podcast and also Fast Break Breakfast was telling me for 2 years that I was just way too high on Ziaire Williams. And then it's like, after another year of watching him take like the most circuitous route possible with the ball in his hands, I'm latching on to things like, well, he's like kind of moving more decisively when he's popping out to the perimeter. So I want to hold out hope because I feel like he looks like someone who should be really good, but I just can't offer like real opinions on those, or you can't trust them at least.
Didn't he have a national TV game last year where he went crazy, like on TNT? Didn't he have a career high? I think he did. I'll look it up.
There was also that stretch where he like padded his 3-point totals in 2 games versus the Knicks. It's like he had this absurd volume in those 2 games and it brought his 3-point percentage up. I think if you're asking me personally, maybe I haven't seen enough of Keon Johnson like from Summer League. I probably would hold out hope more for Ziaire Williams, but that's probably because I remained bullish on him for like, even in the face of just all this evidence of people telling me like, no, I'm like, well, hey, look, he finally started grabbing some extra rebounds. So I'm latching on to straws at this point.
Yeah. I think I definitely need to get a little more acquainted with Ziaire Williams and like see him in a new context and whatever. They're both, I know Keon Johnson is 22. I think Ziaire Williams, if he's not 22, he's 22, about to turn 23. So I think this is probably a year for him, as it is for Keon, like a make or break year in terms of like what his NBA future is going to be, just like a big inflection point for him. I would say, actually answering the question this time, who I'm more intrigued by, probably Keon.
I think the physical tools, I think it probably makes that's probably the rational answer.
You bet on the guy who's clearly an NBA level athlete just probably has more pathways to like winning on the margins, creating minutes for himself, and then like expanding on that. You know what I mean? So I would say him. I don't think it's super cut and dry. And if my answer changed in like 2 months, 3 months of play, it would not be surprising at all.
If Ben Simmons is healthy, how are you deploying him with this team? I think a lot of people, and probably including myself, view him as his most valuable thing that he brings to the Nets is if they're willing to take on bad money, his expiring contract might be attractive to certain teams. That's where I'm at on the Ben Simmons experience until he proves otherwise inside a crowded gym. None of the empty gym stuff.
Damn. Okay, that changes things. Yeah, it's not worth it for the Nets to get off his contract. This is kind of what we've been saying for like 2 years now. Like, yeah, you dump him, attach a pick, whatever, but like his contract is not the difference last year between the Nets being like a bad, mediocre team and like a really good team. So you maybe he's like, you get off some salary, whatever. I think at this point it's written in stone that, maybe not stone, but written in, I guess, clay, if that's more malleable, that he's going to ride out the season. He's not going to make the difference, barring something miraculous, between 20 and 35 wins. And then then he's off the books. Then he expires. Yeah, like you could trade him and probably forfeit if not a first, then a few seconds. But
I was even thinking, what about the opposite route? Like you had mentioned, let's just say the Warriors were a team to watch. Like if you can take back, I know you mentioned they might have cap space plans next summer. So if that's your plan, then no. But there might be teams that are looking to get off some money, and you're the team that's getting back picks just because Ben Simmons is expiring. If the Nets should absolutely not be including anything to get off of Ben Simmons.
Yeah,
like they don't. That should not happen.
I think some of the cap space. I don't think they're in a soup. I don't think they really want to take back a lot of long-term money. Maybe if it's clear the way things are going in a few months, okay, we'll take somebody that expires the season after this. So they expire in the summer of 26. I could see that. But really, I'm just not we're going to have to wait to see as the market gets, crystallizes a little before the deadline. I think right now, if not overwhelming, then very high odds are that they just ride out the season with him. His contract expires, and it's a dissatisfying but fitting end to the Ben Simmons experience in Brooklyn.
Is he do they anticipate him being healthy this year? And if you mentioned they were close to bottom 5 in average offensive possession time last year, if their plan is to play fast, and I hope it is, a healthy Ben Simmons still has just utility, even if you don't trust him to get all the way to the basket. It's just in transition as that ball mover, has size. So I would be all for healthy Ben Simmons just sprinting up and down the floor for 15 minutes a game or something. If that's is that a possibility, or is it just?
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, they tried to do it last year, and Ben wasn't in a contract year then, so maybe he's a little bit more. I don't know. Maybe I'm not saying his injuries are fake, obviously, but maybe magically he plays 40 games this year instead of 15 or 30 instead of 15. Who knows?
Yeah. Do they need to take him? I'm sure. Look, back stuff is finicky. I'm not a doctor, but it's finicky. Maybe they take him the Jonathan Isaac route, which is look at how the Magic, completely different players, but the Magic are well, you're never really going to play more than 20 minutes a game. And we recognize that you're probably going to miss between 20 and 35 games every single year.
Yeah. And I think the funny thing about Ben last year is that he'd play and they'd be okay, we're going to pass, they're going to play super fast. And if you catch the ball from a Ben Simmons pass, you're shooting this three. We're driving up it was like a Ponzi scheme to rack up potential assists for Ben Simmons. It was crazy because I was just guys, why don't you just do this when he's not on the floor too? Nic Claxton and Trendon Watford can dribble to half court and then make a pass to a shooter, and then that guy can shoot. You don't have to not do this when he's not on the court. But hey, I'm not the NBA coach. So I think we will see them play like that when Ben's on the floor. And as to whether they anticipate him being healthy, they should, if they can see the future on that, they should tell me what lottery ticket to buy tomorrow.
I didn't include a question about this player because I just view him as sort of a transient property. I don't mean to call him property in Brooklyn, but Cam Johnson, he does seem divisive if you go in other NBA circles because of his contract. And so it's can you make, I don't want a sales pitch on Cam Johnson. I think people understand the value, but what are people maybe missing about what Cam Johnson actually does that, his contract is actually not bad. This is someone that I think fans more so, I think a lot of teams probably understand, but fans have, a lot of them from the teams been well, we don't want to give up anything for Cam Johnson because the contract is awful. And that feels that everyone's entitled to their opinion, but that's a take that feels it veers way too far from reality for me.
Yeah, I hate that take. I think Cam Johnson might be the ultimate example of NBA fans and us in general still not really used to just how much money these guys are making now.
Right.
He's making 20 million, 22 million, 21 and a half for the next 3 years. That's what 21 million a year gets you in the NBA now. A good, solid role player who is going to shoot near 40% from three every year and be probably a 60th, 55th percentile defender at 6'9", 6'8". That's a good player. He's fine. I think maybe Nets fans expected some of the Mikal Bridges creation uptick when he got here, but he's still just a good, solid player and a good locker room guy you really want on a good team that is miscast among a bunch of guys that don't create advantages in Brooklyn. And I saw this tweet the other day that I'm going to read. And here over the last 2 years, Cam Johnson per 100 possessions is 25, 8, and 4 on 39% from 3 on 11 attempts. Trey Murphy, 23, 7, and 3 on 39% from 3 on 11 attempts. And you ask an NBA fan about Trey Murphy, and he's the second coming. So
I think the two distinct differences. One is I do think that Trey Murphy has a higher ceiling as a defender, even though we maybe haven't always seen it in New Orleans. The other thing is we have a tendency, I'll throw myself in here because I'm sure it's happened, before players sign their second contract, they get romanticized. And then I'm interested to see what's the perception of Tyrese Maxey now that he's on the max. Think the player I use the most. Remember how gaga people were over Tyler Hero? Then he gets his next contract. It's like, oh, like why would any team ever want to take on Tyler Hero? So I'm wondering if that, Cam Johnson's deal was less than that, but I feel like that becomes increasingly too much at play with the way that we evaluate, or some people evaluate players.
I also think people just expected this last year's Nets team to be better. Maybe they shouldn't have. Maybe I was one of those people. And you can't look at a team that underperformed and be like, okay, well, that guy did what he was supposed to, and that guy did what he was supposed to. You have to find someone who didn't do what they were supposed to. And Cam Johnson, who missed every clutch three he took last year. Like, he's like every big three in the fourth quarter they needed last year, he missed. It was the anti-Tyler Johnson experience when Tyler Johnson with the Nets shot like 36% from three, but made every single one. And Nets fans, I check Basketball Reference. I'm like, what do you mean he's not shooting 45% from three? So that sucked for Cam Johnson last year. And the team was also not good. And he missed like a lot of time with all of these like kind of not like minor leg injuries. And so he got the reputation as like, oh, he like is kind of soft and like not clutch and not built for it. And so the aesthetic bias went against him and the team sucked and he was like an easy target. I think that's what happened last year with Cam Johnson. But you know what you're getting. Good team's going to trade for him. He's going to have a game in the playoffs where he hits 6-7 threes, has like 2 steals, maybe a dunk, ends up with like 25 points in like 27 minutes.
That, by the way, that's something else he's guilty of. Was he was 23 in his rookie year, and people tend to just like. But I also think, and I think this is fair because he's not marketed, and even the way he's written about by people who are super smart a lot of the time. I'm not saying you. Everything is focuses on his offense, and there are teams that need defense that have been linked to him, and it's like I think you framed it the perfect way. It's like he's going to be between like the 51st and 64th percentile in defense as a guy who's 6'9", and like that has value into itself. And so I think that might be throwing some fans for a whirl. It's like, well, we don't want to add him into this equation when like we clearly need defense from this spot. And it's no, he's not going to anchor your defense, but like he's not going to hurt it.
Tall and can shoot. I'm going to like say that like I'm till I go blue in the face. Like that's that's really valuable. And not everybody does that. It's a secretly uncommon combination of skills in the NBA. Guys that are tall and can shoot. Not all of them.
What can we do to get him to rebound? What has to happen there?
Not playing.
Anyone who's watching on YouTube needs to go back to that mark and look at Lucas's face when I ask that question.
Come on, I'm trying to juice his value here. You don't need to ask about that.
Oh, so are you ready for the cookie cutter portion of the podcast?
Yes, I'm ready.
What is, looking at this roster, is going to be the biggest strength this season?
I would say, honestly, their ability to play fast if they lean into it. Like, if they play Clax and Watford and Schroeder, who can zip up the court in a minute, and Cam Thomas, and, like, at the start of the season, Cam John, like, they're going to run out lineups with 4 or 5 guys that can get a rebound and go. And I think you're going to see, like, a lot of cool stuff in transition and them playing fast as, like, there's a lot of ball handling on the floor, maybe not a lot of decision-making and passing. And I think it's important that we separate those two because, like, we talked, like, oh, they don't have a lot of creators, like, they don't have a lot of whatever, but they have a lot of guys that can literally dribble the basketball. So that'll be fun.
And that's clearly their biggest weakness too, right? Is you're like talking dribbling and decision-making. And that's because they're not trying to, or they're not as invested in winning games, that's mostly fine. But when you're looking at like, well, if we're trying to try different things and optimize the development of player X or get Cam Thomas off the ball, that's something that matters quite a bit.
They were a sneaky, terrible passing team last year. And I know like it's hard to think about that, I think, in terms of like from a team-wide construction and not like just individual, but like last year they would often play lineups where there was not one passer better than league average for their position, I would say. Like maybe Mikal Bridges came the closest to it, but like when you play Cam Thomas, Mikal, Cam Johnson, Dorian Finney-Smith, Nic Claxton, it's like, where's the passing? That's probably the worst part of them this season as well.
So when you're looking at this team, and I won't hold you to this because I feel like it's going to shift a bunch throughout the year, but like, what does the top 10 rotation at full strength look like?
Even I'm not beyond this. Let me just pull up Basketball Reference real quick, just so I have in front of me. I think Ben, if he's healthy, they're gonna start him. Like I don't.
Oh, okay. Wow, throwing me for a curveball right off the bat. I love it.
It's just is it really worth it to make like a stink? Like he kind of like said, yeah, I want to start when I'm healthy last year, even though he didn't really have leverage other than the $40 million on his contract, which I guess is pretty nice leverage to have. You can just put Dorian Finney-Smith on the bench and Dorian will be like the nicest guy and be happy and know he's probably going to get traded to a good team anyway. So if I had to guess, wow, I write about the perfect team to make me look really stupid.
I do think so. There's at least like when you're looking at their rotation, there's like 7 overall locks, I would think, with Dennis Schroeder, Cam Thomas, DFS, Cam Johnson, Nic Claxton, Ben Simmons if he's healthy, and then Noah Clowney. So would you agree with those 7 names, or like they are
Sharpe is number 8, but yes.
Okay.
Because like you can't, you got to play him.
Given what this team needs, if you want to create space, like we have not mentioned Bojan Bogdanovic's name once.
We have not. 9.
All right.
9. You got to have somebody.
That means we have to choose between Jalen Wilson or Trendon Watford for number 10, which kind of breaks my heart a little bit.
Yeah. Wow. You're really out on the Killian Hayes experience.
Once he gets guarantee his contract first, and then we could talk, Brooklyn.
I would say we also haven't mentioned Shake Milton. Just as by the way,
they clearly that trade was the Shake Milton sign-in trade, and Mikal Bridges was the throw-in for the Knicks to help get that deal. Yeah.
Shake Milton.
You talk about they need dribble and decision making. Like that's someone as a baseline is. Yeah, let's throw them out. We could throw them out there.
Yeah, that's like these guys. I would like to play in Brooklyn if I was Shake Milton. Like you might just end up playing 30 minutes in a game if you make a couple nice passes in the first quarter and hit a couple threes. I would say that Jalen's probably gonna play more than Bojan at first, just because like they clearly have like a reason to play Jalen Wilson. This is why the more I go down this roster, because you can't bench Trendon Watford either. The more I go down this roster, the more I'm like, they have to, like, it can't.
They're also a team that I think when we say a 10-man rotation, it's like, no, they're emptying the bench every single night might be the reality. So
if they go into the first game of the year with this rotation, with this roster that they have on paper, they might be the first team in NBA history to regularly play 14 guys a night. Well, you can only dress 12. So
yeah, 12. I was about to say that. They're playing 14 guys a night. Some rule has been broken.
Well, come on. At the NBA offices, maybe they won't be watching Brooklyn games that closely.
So you can approach this question however you want. Is it, if you want to view it as, well, they're trying to lose this game that goes into crunch time, or if they're trying to win it, but like if you're coaching the team, what is your crunch time lineup?
Nic Claxton and Noah Clowney, I think, because Noah Clowney might lose you the game, and that's fine too, because you want to lose and you also want him out there to get experience. But for the semblance of putting together a real competitive team, and it's a game you want to win for morale, Clowney you can play too again if you need defense. So Clowney, Claxton, Cam Johnson, Cam Thomas, and probably Dennis Schroeder, honestly. If you're looking for a guy like that can really play pick and roll and organize the offense. And then in there, like, you can probably take Noah Clowney out for Dorian some games and whatnot, Cam Johnson for Dorian. So I'd say that. I would say that as small as maybe Dennis Schroeder and a Cam Thomas backcourt sounds, And if Cam Johnson isn't bringing you a bunch of defensive value, that's why you have Clowney and Claxton, on the back line.
Is there a offbeat, weirdo, funky lineup you would like to see them try at some point this season?
I'll limit myself to not like the 5 end of bench guys like Killian Hayes, Keon Johnson, Ziaire Williams, Trendon Watford 5. I would like to see them go with Schroeder and Cam Thomas like as a start to this lineup, because I do really believe in Cam Thomas, like the Norm Powell-esque 3-point chucking off ball guy as like a potential like seriously interesting NBA type of scorer. And then obviously we have to go Claxton and Clowney for rim protection, and then throw in Keon Johnson. Like I want to see him play. I want to see how real the summer league stuff is. You just have a bunch of ball handling. You need Cam Thomas to take a bunch of threes, and you have these long, psychotically shot blocking bigs that can move all over the place on the back line.
This will surprise anyone who listens to this podcast, but my lineup is not going to be ultra small. I would pay ungodly amounts of money to see Clowney, Claxton, Cam Johnson, Jalen Wilson, and Trendon Watford. I don't know what the offense ends up looking like, but like let's just have all the 6'7", 6'8" dudes and up out there and kind of see and flesh out. We'll figure out look, Cam Johnson can shoot. Jalen Wilson can shoot. Nic Claxton will be the point guard. You could talk me into putting Ben Simmons into this lineup for someone else. If we need someone who can dribble and decision make, then it's like, okay, fine. But
how many years in a row do you have of Ben Simmons on whatever team he's on making your all weird, all funky lineup? Probably every year he's been in the league, correct?
And I've probably had him as the center in every single iteration.
So, all things must pass, I guess.
Okay, so as we record this, their over-under is set at 19.5. Would you take the over or under, and how many wins would you ultimately see them winding up with?
I'm going to take the over. I was wrong last year when I took the over. But I think I'm going to do it again just because the East is like really bad. Like the bottom half is really bad. And nobody really starts tanking until like around the All-Star break anyway. Like they could be, I don't know how they could be 4-7, 4-8. Like all they need is an 8-win month. Maybe that's a stretch. A 6-win month early in the year, and they're a third of the way there. I just think they end up with 21, 22 wins, and that's probably enough to be one of the 3 worst records that you need for the Cooper Flagg sweepstakes.
Oh, it's 4 now. You got one of the 4 worst records in your golden.
Oh, right. That's true. Then I'm even more comfortable taking the over.
And look, if you get 21, that was the 4th worst record in the league last year. Well, it's actually technically the 3rd worst tied, but 2 teams had 21. The total's so low, I want to go over, but I think that I look at this front office and then a couple others like Washington, maybe Portland. And Portland's a big one because they might have too much good talent on the roster. Right. But if things go too well at the beginning of the season, I really think that the Nets will pull the ripcord a lot sooner than other teams might, where it's like we've seen Utah kind of hold on to it for too long. And I could see like Toronto or Atlanta or Chicago, like those are going to be teams that even Detroit this year will kind of like if they're playing well, they might try and ride it. The Nets have this 2-year window of controlling their next 2 draft picks. I'm just convinced that Sean Marks isn't leaving anything to chance. And so if they get to a point where they're on pace for more than like 18, it's just, he's going to rip the floor out from under everybody, whether it's trades, whether we start seeing like made up body parts on the injury report for Cam Johnson and Dorian Finney-Smith. That is my belief as of now. Maybe it will shift when me and Grant actually do our over-unders. The total's still low. Like
it's so low.
The 2 things I struggle with, and I wonder if you're the same way, is to predict that teams will win fewer than 20 games or win more than 60. Like those are just the numbers that scare me.
Yeah, those are because it's you get a lot of luck and unforeseeable circumstances and things that are tough to predict. Because like if you're predicting around the 40 range, it's like, okay, I'm set on this team being a little better or worse in these areas specifically, and that's why but the Nets, it's going to be a crapshoot. It's going to be a crapshoot. And the one the one thing that really lends credence to your argument is that their best players, they have the perfect tank commander in Cam Thomas potentially as like the guy who's taking up a lot of offensive possessions. And their best player, Nic Claxton, is not a guy that is going to like lead you to wins. Same thing with Cam Johnson, honestly.
I was about to say, you kind of like just described the Wizards dynamic between Jordan Poole and Kyle Kuzma. Jordan Poole, perfect tank commander, eat up a lot of possession. Then Kyle Kuzma, very good. He's not going to win you a ton of basketball games, though.
There you go. Those games I will be locked in for.
I will think, I'm not saying it'll be the Nets. It could be. I think there's going to be a team, I don't want to say historically bad, but that's just going to be such a tough watch because they're really not fucking around. And they're like, this is a season where there's only a couple teams that aren't invested in winning out of the gate. And we're going to make sure that we don't accidentally. And look, the East specifically, I wouldn't throw the Nets in here, but I've now said this like 3 or 4 times. Someone is accidentally going to make the play-in the East because I'm not convinced that there are 10 teams that want to get into the postseason next year.
Yeah. The 10th seed in the plan is hopefully they accidentally make the playoffs too from there and they knock out a 7 seed that really does.
I want to see, because we haven't had it. I predict it every year because I'm trying to manifest it. I want a 10 seed to get into the playoffs by way of the play-in tournament. So I'll predict it every year, even if I don't believe it. But yeah, so like the East is like, there's like that we're in the West, like you could still be kind of good and your record will just be so bad because everyone else is so good. But in the East, it's like, if you stumble into victories out of the gate, like it might be put up or shut up time to pick a direction.
The one thing that I think could negate that is like this draft is considered to have a really strong top 5, 6. So like as good, as amazing as Cooper Flagg is, maybe a franchise will say, okay, like how miserable do we really want to make everybody for slightly better lottery odds? Like, that's all I can say.
That is a fantastic viewpoint. And I was actually talking, Matt Moderno of Believe in Wizards brought it up to me. Not something I've considered enough to where, because the lottery odds are flattened to begin with, like if you're really going to invest in this gradual direction, it should be because you are comfortable with, I want to lock in a top 5 pick, let's say. And it can't be viewed through the lens of like, well, like it's Cooper Flagg or bust. Like you just don't want to end up being the Detroit Pistons where it's years of futility in the standings only to constantly just not get one of these like top 4 or 5 picks.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially this. Yeah. And that's the one thing that like this year you're probably like more okay picking 4 or 5 than last year with Detroit, who really got killed. I mean, hey, maybe I think Ron Holland's going to be good, but like
that. So I trust some certain draft people, and Bleacher Report's Jonathan Wasserman he had Ron Holland number 1 on his big board.
Yes.
And I went back and watched, and I can see the theory of it. It comes down to, I know this is very binary, but the jumper for me. Like if he's going to hit jumpers at some point, then I see it. And if he's not, then I don't.
The thing I do like about Ron in Detroit is that they got Cade another like psycho. Like they got another like dog, like competitor. Like
him and Asar, if they can find minutes to play them together. And I was talking to Laz Jackson, who covers the Pistons. He thinks they're going to play together quite a bit. And like they have Fred Vincent there. So like maybe like one of those guys pops as a shooter. So
yeah, it's true. It's true. I think probably the funniest subplot of last season was Cade being on the 27 losses in a row Pistons. I could not think one of the funniest players to end up there and who played his best ball of the season during it.
Sitting step back threes. Yeah, it's just like
that man hates to lose anything. Poor guy.
Lucas, this was great as always, but is there anything or anyone? Is this you want a Killian Hayes space? It's a safe space. You can get off some Killian Hayes takes here. Is there anything we haven't discussed that you think we need to touch upon before I let you skedaddle?
I just make sure that like people know I don't dislike Bam Adebayo. I know he has real shooters on
the YouTube thumbnail and the title is going to say differently.
Okay. All right. I really don't want him to quote tweet me. That would be, I think, worse than Trendon Watford.
Heat players, I will say, feel more likely to do it because it's happened to me with a few Heat players, Dion Waiters and James Johnson. So same era Heat. So maybe I'm like stuck in the past, but they did it. And they didn't quote tweet me. They quote tweeted someone tweeting about something I wrote about them.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I won't promote it that way. But look, if the real sickos make it to the point of the podcast where you're who do we comparing Cam Johnson to Larry Bird? That's how we know the real sickos.
Day'Ron Sharpe.
Day'Ron Sharpe to Larry Bird, excuse me.
I mean, who else? That's what I thought. Off the rim, making the pass. Yes. Well, someone worse should have done it. Someone worse should have done that pass.
Lucas, thank you so much for your time. This was great. Are you able just to tell our listeners where they can find you and all the great work that you're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So Nets Daily, an SB Nation, sub site, and I cover the Nets there. I cover the Liberty there as well. Again, maybe possibly the worst and the best professional basketball teams. It's very we have an outside chance. I don't even know how outside it is, but so that there, and then my Twitter is just my name, Lucas Kaplan, with an underscore at the end. I do some freelance.
Who do we need to go after that had the Lucas Kaplan without the underscore? Who's that?
I don't know. I used to have it, and then I changed like way back in the day, and then I changed it, and I tried to get it back, and someone had snapped it up.
Damn it!
I was a Twitter novice. That was on me. And yeah, I also do work for Swish Theory, great basketball content website.
Yeah, you guys got a nice stable of writers over there at Swish Theory.
Yeah, we got a real fat stack of talent. So yeah, Twitter, I would say you'll find everything, or Nets Daily. And thank you, Dan, for having me on. This maybe next year it'll be an hour about Cooper Flagg. I know I trust Adam to do the right thing.
I will say, I don't remember the last time I saw active NBA players showering praise upon someone who wasn't in the league yet, because it's always sort of felt, if not taboo, like they're going to be protective of their territory. Like, no, we're not hyping up this kid in high school or who's going into college, but coming out of the Team USA minicamp or whatever, the things they were saying about him, I'm like, holy fuck, like Cooper Flagg must be really good.
Adam Silver, I trust you to do the right thing. That's all I'm going to say.
The envelopes are in the freezer as we speak, even though it's not really how it's like done at the moment. But
he knows what's right.
Nobody does it better covering the Nets. The links to Lucas's Twitter profile and handle will be in the podcast and YouTube description. Thank you so much again for all your time and insight. And as you know by now, I will be pestering you again in the future. So I will talk to you soon.
Look forward to it.